So the second section of chapter 4 is about collecting data as well. It's collecting data through observational studies and particularly experiments. And I'm going to say this lots of times, a well-designed experiment is the only way that we can intuit or infer causal connection between two variables. Otherwise, it's just an association, and there could be other things in the way, but experiments are the only way to prove cause. You can go ahead and pause on this or look in the textbook. These are what this section has to do with, and we're pretty much going to, in this lecture, get down to here. And then the rest of it's going to be in the second part that I will probably put up in a couple days. So I hope you can hear my son's showering music. We need to make sure that we understand it's one of the most important things that you can learn from a stats class, whether you're going to use stats in your career or not, is the difference between an observational study and an experiment. An observational study looks at individuals and measures variables of interest. Does one thing seem to be connected to another? But there is no influence on the responses. There is no treatment that's given to one group over another to see if that thing causes something. Whereas an experiment deliberately imposes some treatment, and that's the only way that we can see if there's a causal connection. For example, for years and years and years, people were saying in the health community that soy, whether it's tofu or edamame or whatever like that, had a huge connection between low rates of breast cancer and prostate cancer and osteoporosis and heart disease. Observational studies shown that Asian-style diet, there was definitely association between lower rates of those diseases. However, in the last couple of years, experiments have been done, including an example like this, where elderly women were randomly assigned to either receiving soy or a placebo to see if they prevented osteoporosis or a furthering of osteoporosis. And there was no significant connection shown in replicated experiments around osteoporosis. So even though there's an association in observational studies, we cannot intuit any causation until the experiments are run. And the first set of experiments is that that looked at osteoporosis showed no connection, no significant connection. So what's going on? We still don't know. Could it be genetics that Asian cultures have that serve as some sort of block against these cancers or osteoporosis or heart disease? Are there other dietary factors that are not considered in there? Could it be possibly that a lot of Asian cultures do physical exercises like Tai Chi and such that are weight-bearing and that might affect osteoporosis? We don't know. But at this point, there is no conclusive experimental evidence that says that soy makes a difference in a lot of these things. So one of the reasons that an observational study, whereas it can be pretty powerful in terms of showing a connection between things, we can't prove causality because there's going to be a lot of variables that could be causing what's going on, even though they're hidden or not obvious. So well-designed experiments take steps to prevent confounding. They control the variables that might be other things. So confounding occurs when two variables are associated in such a way that their effects on the response variable cannot be distinguished from each other. So in terms of the soy experiments, it's possible that one of the explanatory variables might be genetics. It might be exercise. It might be other things that create that issue. And until the experiments were run, they couldn't tell. There is definitely loud music. I'm sorry if you don't like his taste in music. Anyway, an experiment is a statistical study, and what is important about it is that there is a treatment involved to the subjects in the experiment, whether those subjects are people, animals, objects, whatever. And there's a response that's being observed and measured. And so whatever is being given to each of the groups is called a treatment. And a treatment possibly has several explanatory variables, and we'll get to that. And then experimental units are the smallest collection of individuals in which the treatments are applied. So when the units are human beings, they're often called subjects, or the animals are often called subjects, but it's the smallest collection of individuals. And sometimes it's a school, an entire school, or an entire classroom, or something like that. But most of the time, we'll talk about. Just like there are ways to collect data from or survey badly, there's definitely ways to experiment badly. And one of the main ways to experiment badly is to not pay attention to the variables, the confounding things that can get in the way of you being able to infer causation. So many use a design like this where you're like, okay, I want to know if this online SAT prep course is making a difference. And so they'll take students, maybe give them a pretest, give them the SAT prep course, that's a treatment, and then they check to see what the response was. Was there a change in the SAT score? This one is not taking into account a lot of different things. There needs to be more to it for it to be really decide if it's the SAT course that's causing the problem, or maybe, causing the change in SAT scores, or maybe it's that they're just more motivated than other people or whatever. So we need to consider all the variables. The remedy for confounding is to perform a comparative experiment in which some units receive one treatment and very similar units, people, schools, animals, computers, receive another treatment. Really well-designed experiments compare two or more treatments, and that might have factors of strength or something related to it, particularly if we're talking about medicine. And then a control group that receives no treatment. Comparing the two groups isn't enough, though, if the two groups differ. And so one of the reasons that we learn so much about a random assignment and doing things in terms of simple random samples was to make sure that we know that when we're setting up an experiment, we have to also randomly assign the subjects to the different treatments so we can offset some of the confounding variables that might get in the way of inferring cause. I'm going to let you go ahead. I don't need to read this to you. You're capable of reading it. So you can go ahead and take notes what you want from this. But the big thing is that we've got two or more treatments, random. We've got to control as many variables as possible, and that we need to replicate it with a big enough sample or repeating it with a new set of subjects. In a completely randomized design, the treatments are assigned completely by chance. So we get our people, and then whether we use a random number generator or we use flipping a coin or pulling things out of a hat, people are assigned to group 1 and group 2. And then, again, a coin is flipped or a random number generator. So group 1 gets treatment 1 and group 2 gets treatment 2 randomly. And then we can go ahead and look at the results. We're going to look at more complicated designs in a bit in the next lesson as well. But the idea is that it has to be randomized. So this is a visual of a multi-factor experimental design. And multi-factor means that it's more than one thing you're looking at to see what is going to possibly be the causal connection to the response variable. It's not clear what the response variable here is, but it's clearly something having to do with instruction. Is your explanatory variables. And the factors that are being looked at here are time and instruction, as well as the setting of the instruction. And so the response could be who's doing better on matching the material, or who's more confident, or their increase in confidence around the mastering of the material. But there's two factors that are being looked at: time and instruction and setting. And within that, there's levels of those factors. And so time and instruction has the number of hours in the week, and then the setting has in the class or outside of the class. So now there's 4 different groups that are being looked at. There's 4 different treatments that are being taken care of. Someone who gets 1 hour a week in class, there's a group that gets 1 hour a week out of class, one group 4 hours a week in class, 4 hours a week out of class. So there's 4 different things. So they're looking at level as well as setting. So this is a much more complicated method, but it's also going to give you a greater understanding of what's really causing, or if there's a significance in any of these situations.
No, this is going to be